Brad, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today to talk about your new movie, Blood.
Course.
So I've got to ask right off the bat, what drew you to this project and why did you want to do it?
Well, I read it. I mean, I didn't write the script, but it was given to me, and I just really responded to two things. One, the genre sort of horror of it, the more sort of straightforward genre horror element to it, which I thought was kind of fun and creepy. But then on top of that, more importantly to me, like the just this character, Michelle's character, this mother who's struggling to just sort of do good by her kids and keep her kids safe, and ultimately is put in this sort of situation with where like one of her sons is has a, is like in danger of dying, and whatever she'll do whatever she needs to do to keep him alive, like that sort of sacrifice that she's willing to make to protect her family. Like I just found that very moving, and the sort of like the fact that the harder she struggles to save her own child, the more she's in danger of becoming like the harder she struggles to keep her own child from becoming a monster, the more she's sort of in danger of becoming a monster herself. There's sort of that cool little parallel as the movie sort of unfolds. So I just like the fact that it worked on sort of different levels, and I like the tone of it. It just had a cool sort of spooky, but like sort of sad, melancholy quality, which is something that I kind of been drawn to, and wasn't just like your typical jump scare kind of story. It was more a more emotional, more psychological, which is always
Sure.
sort of more my thing, really.
Was there ever a thought to expand on like a bigger backstory for like how like what happened to Owen, or did you feel leaving it more ambiguous would make the audience question it more?
I mean, my instinct is to lean into not over explaining stuff. I mean, I kind of those kind of movies that I watch and like tend to be ones that live in a little ambiguity, where you can kind of create the explanation that you want. Like you're given just enough to kind of build your own explanation. I think those are more interesting than rather than spoon feeding the audience like this is how it is happening. Now, in the script, it was always written as like there was really no solid explanation as to what was happening to Owen. It was sort of implied that something had bitten him, right? I mean, that's sort of still the case, but and we kind of embraced that. Not there were some, yeah, sure. There's certainly moments where you have conversations. Should we see something inside that tree, for instance? Should we see a monster or a creature? Or should something come out of it? And I think that in another kind of movie that would be acceptable. For me, it just seemed more poetic somehow to not over explain it, because then it kind of leaves, you know again, it leaves the audience to wonder, and often the best kind of horror lives in the ambiguity rather than in the explanation. I mean, if you think of a movie like The Shining, there's so many go online, and how many interpretations are there about what that movie's about? So having a movie that can have multiple levels of interpretation to me is always interesting. So, yeah, we kind of we flirted with the idea of a little more explanation, but I think to me that was enough that something bad was happening to this kid. I mean, it seemed.
I ran a Blockbuster and a Hollywood Video for a long time back in
Oh,
the
really?
day, and
Wow.
I always remember seeing like the DVD cover art for The Machinist, and I was like, do I rent this movie? Do I take it home with me? Do I not? And like I
Right.
saw it, and like I was like, I know now that when I go see a Brad Anderson directed movie, I'm gonna see some shit and some stuff that I'm not prepared for, I guess, to whether that's an emaciated Christian Bale or whatever
Right.
happened inside Stonehurst Asylum with those like electroshock scenes. Like, do you set out to do scenes like that are going to like shock the audience? I know like the one that I'm referring to in this one is the tree shots and basically like when Owen's going upstairs to the crib with the baby, and I was like, we're not going to do this, are we? And I was like, I
Oh
don't know,
my God.
Brad
Yeah, I
Anderson's
thought.
directing this. We might be doing this.
I mean, we should, yeah. If I were really, pushing it, it wouldn't have it would have gone even further. But yeah, I mean, I think that sure. I mean, suspense to me is a big theme that in the films I do and the stories that I'm attracted to. like how to build that. I mean, it comes from like all the way back for me anyhow. I like to Hitchcock and the kind of master of suspense himself, and all the people that all the filmmakers that kind of evolved out of that. And I love that. I love that. And so like in this movie, yeah, like for instance, the scene with the baby, you're really amping up that suspense. It's like it keeps the audience on the edge of their seat. I like those moments in movies, and I like to sort of see that if you can create them, the more you can amp up that suspense and keep an audience like cringing, the better. But I also feel it's good also not always to like satisfy them with, the total payoff, like a lot of it could happen off camera and still be powerful. I mean, I think when I read a script, like the same way you when you watch a movie, it's always fun to have those specific set pieces that are really kind of crazy or scary or deeply suspenseful. I mean, those are the fun scenes to do. I mean, and this one and reading it, probably those scenes that you mentioned, and then also the scene with when the scenes to me where she's having to when Michelle's character has to feed her son. Like to me, that was like that moment to me was powerful because it's horrific and gross, but it's also kind of beautiful. It's like a mother nursing her child, and it's just something about that weird. Like you're both kind of going like, oh, that's disgusting, and then at the same time you're going like, wow, what a sacrifice she's willing to make for her child. So where that kind of combination of horror and like an emotion to me is really interesting.
I think the only other movie that I can think that like makes me think of this, there was a movie called Grace back in 2009. It was like an independent horror movie where like
I remember that one.
yeah, it was like the mother has like a stillborn baby, but it's actually alive, and she has to like feed it, but it only likes blood at that point. That's that's
Yeah,
where I was. That's the only thing I couldn't think of it for like a day, and I was like, "What is the name of this movie?" And I went back and looked at it, but that was the only one that reminded me of this.
there's another
Uh,
movie actually that there's a movie by I think it's Wes Craven or one of those guys called Martin. It was made in the 70s, and it's about a kid who gets bitten by something, and it's just about him wanting. He just has a craving for blood. He's not a vampire. He just
just
finds
likes it.
people and drinks the blood. And I remember seeing that movie and being, that's really cool. It's like the vampire story, but it's almost done as a medical mystery. Like, why does he want blood? So I thought that was kind of a way to play this a little. It's the you could interpret it in a supernatural way, but you could also say like he's just got a virus. Maybe a bat bit him, or the dog bit the bat bit the dog, and the dog bit him. Just like the same way that the people in the market in China ate the infected bat that gave people COVID. So there's like it could be that like it's just a medical mystery that's unsolved as opposed to something like vampires. So that was an interesting way to go.
I know you've done a lot of a mix of TV and movies lately. Do you have a preferred project you like to work on? Like I know you've done like Peacemaker and Titans and Debris and Clickbait, and now you're doing like you got
Yeah.
two other movies in development after this. Do you prefer one to the other, or just
I
whatever
mean,
piques your
television
interest?
versus film. I mean, I like both worlds. I mean, film to me is more how I got into the business in the first place, as like an independent filmmaker, if you will. And television started to came after that, out of necessity, really, and also just interest. But I think to me, I prefer making movies. I just like telling stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And like, you can obviously as a director in the right kind of project, like when I have mostly control over creative control because these aren't like big movies. Like it just makes me, I get to make the film I want to make, right? And I like that singular experience. Television is more like you come in, you do a couple episodes, or you do a pilot, and then it has a life of its own. But the good thing about TV is that you get to do things, you get to tell kind of stories or work with actors or situations that you might not normally do, that might not normally interest you. You know what I mean? Like a Peacemaker, that was a fun show to do, but like it's not like my thing. Like I'm not like a superhero guy, but it was fun to do it and do action sequences and work with John Cena and all that. But like the James Gunn thing is like crazy. But like
Yeah, I was
it's
gonna
like
I was gonna add
I would never make a movie like that. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be my thing.
I was
But
gonna ask how James Gunn was decided on you. Like he directed five, and he only like gave three to to other people. How did he come to you for that one episode of Peacemaker?
I don't know. We talked a little. I think he likes Session Nine. I think he's sort of a fan of that. But I mean, I don't know his specific thinking, but it was a fun gig. You know what I mean? I like doing that. Um, I like doing. I like mixing it up. I like not to be sort of tied down to one type of story. You
Yeah,
know.
sure. I think the last question that I have for you is, what do you have going on in the future? I know you're in Malta right now shooting a film called The Silent Hour. I also saw you have a film like in the works with Peter Dinklage that looks like a kind of a Othello kind of story like that. Can you just talk to me what you got going on?
Yeah, the movie I'm doing now is called, as you said, The Silent Hour. It's more of a straight out thriller cop drama about a cop who's going deaf, who is put in a situation where he has to sort of protect this deaf woman from these bad guys. I mean, you can almost imagine it as like Die Hard, but with in the deaf community. It's sort of a cool concept. And so it's Joel Kinnaman plays the guy, and Mark Strong is the other guy, and it's sort of a cool project. I'm doing it just because I've never done anything with the deaf community before, and there's a lot of signing in the movie, which is unusual and different and challenge for me. So I'm looking forward to that. So we're shooting that here in Malta. And then I got the Peter Dinklage movie is called The Dwarf, and it's based on a novel that was written in the 40s. It's like a dark medieval uh, Machiavellian drama about a court dwarf, not unlike the character he played in Game of Thrones, who sort of decides to kind of like take over from the prince and like kind of become the usurp the power of the prince. So it's very dark and very twisted, and I'm hoping to get that going. He's really it's his passion project that I kind of got on board. Yeah, and a couple other things, I mean, there's always like, you always got to have like four or five different things in this hopper, I've got a couple things I've written myself that trying to get off the ground as well. A couple TV projects in development, but those are the ones that are probably most, on
Sure.
the.
Yeah, I know I have some family members. My cousins are hard of hearing. One is deaf, two can hear a little bit, and they're always
Is that
interested
right?
in movies that like A Quiet Place and stuff like that, where you can
Yeah,
actually see signing. And it's more like, tilted towards there. But it's
exactly.
one of them. I have three of them. One can hear, two of them can hear a little bit, and their mom can hear a little bit. But they're always
Oh,
interested in stuff like that. So, now that I've talked to you about it, I can recommend it to them once it comes
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of this. There's been, Coda, obviously, and
Yeah.
Sound of Metal. There's been a few films recently that have tapped into that world, which is interesting.
But I appreciate your time talking to me today about Blood, Brad. I appreciate it. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what you're doing next.
Okay. Well, nice talking to you. I appreciate it too.
Have a good one.
Hey, talk